Hello everyone and welcome to Kerbal Space Program. In this and following videos I'm going to be walking you through some of the early aspects of this game, and hopefully you'll be able to pick up on how you're supposed to do things as the game progresses. We're going to cover things such as getting science points that we can use in career mode to unlock new technologies and equipment, as well as how to properly launch rockets up into space and achieve orbit. And then from there, maybe go to the moon that you see over here in the background. So without further ado, let us get started. We're going to start a new game. We're going to play in career mode here. We're going to go ahead and call this helpful walkthrough, if I can spell. Okay. Now right here in front of us we have the Kerbal Space Center. Really quickly, this vehicle assembly building is where we build rockets. The space plane hangar is where we build planes. This is the launch pad out here where we launch our rockets. This is the runway where we launch our planes. Our research and development center, this is where we spend our science points to unlock new technologies. This is the tracking station, which gives us an overview of the entire solar system and lets us track any and all missions that we have currently active, whether they're on the planet or in space, all of them. And then we have the astronaut complex, where we can hire astronauts. Administration building, this has purposes later on for getting more funds, science, and reputation. We won't be getting into that early on. It's not very necessary at the moment. And over here we have mission control, where we can accept contracts, and when we fulfill those contracts we will get rewards such as money, reputation, or science points. Speaking of those three things, up here at the top of the screen we have three indicators here. This here is our money. We currently have $25,000. This is our reputation gauge. If we're in the green, our reputation is good, and we're in the yellow, reputation is bad. And then here we have our science points. Right now we have 0. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to mission control and we're going to accept some contracts. We can only accept a maximum of 2 right now, but we're going to go ahead and grab just these 2 here. This one has us recover or transmit any science experiment data from Kerbin to achieve this goal. That'll be really easy. We'll do that right here today. The next one, launch our first vessel. And this one, launch your first vessel off of the launch pad or the runway to achieve this goal. Also really easy. We won't be getting into that today though. So all of the available contracts will appear here. All of your active contracts will be in this tab. And any contracts that you have taken, completed, failed, or canceled will appear here. We'll go ahead and hit this button up in the corner, leave facility, and we'll end up back out here in the Space Center. Alright, so we're going to go to this giant building here in the middle, the vehicle assembly building. We're going to put together our first mission. Now today we're not going to be sending any rockets up into the sky. What we're going to be doing today is simply focusing on gathering science points we can use to unlock things later. So first thing we're going to do, this is the vehicle assembly screen. Over here on the left hand side we have all these different tabs that contain different parts of a spacecraft all these parts you would use, put them together to make a craft to go up into space. We have the pods tab, where we have a Mark 1 command pod. And fuel tanks, we don't have any fuel tanks right now. Engines, we have a solid fuel booster. Command and control, we have nothing. Structural, we have a girder segment. Aerodynamics, we have a basic fin. In utility, we have a parachute for the command pod. And in science, we have a mystery goo containment unit. We'll be using this today to get science points so we can upgrade and get more items in these screens here. So first thing we're going to do is going to select our command pod. Now this is the root part. This will be the base part for the entire rocket. If you need to move the rocket while in the screen, this is the part you would select. Everything that connects to it will move with it. Now while we're in this building, if you press and hold the right mouse button and then move the mouse around, you'll be able to change your view of the craft you are building. Now the mouse wheel will move the camera up and down, and if you hold the left shift button while using the mouse wheel, you will zoom in and out. Okay, so all the parts that we went over here, this is part of the build tab, as you can see here. We also have a crew tab. If you click this, it'll show us our 4 astronauts. On this screen, it shows us how many available seats we have in our craft, and it automatically puts the first person on this list into that pile. In this case, it's Jebediah Kerman, who is a pilot. We also have Bill Kerman, an engineer, Bob Kerman, a scientist, and Valentina Kerman, also a pilot. Now for this particular mission, we don't need a pilot because we're not going to be leaving the ground. What we're going to do is we're going to put a scientist in the command pod. But right now he is currently in the command pod, and we're going to add a mystery goo science unit on this. And we're going to do that by going back to the build tab, going down to the science tab, and grabbing one of these. What we do is you just give it one left click, and it stays with the mouse. As you can see, it's got a bit of a red border around it. That means it's not placeable here. We can set it down by pressing the button again. But as we move it over the command pod, the outline will turn green, and we have the option of placing it on the command pod itself. Like so. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and put it over here on the side. Now this is the crew hatch for the command pod. You want to make sure when you're putting things on your ship, you don't put anything over this, because then the hatch will be unusable. And I'll go over how you know right now, in fact. Down here in the bottom right hand corner, where we have the reset button, this is where the staging sequence will appear when we put together a rocket. Staging works by it gives us different items to activate in sequential order as we put this rocket together. Things such as decouplers, which break the ship apart necessarily and controllably, are parts of stages, as well as activating things like parachutes, which a parachute would go onto the very top of this command pod. You want to make sure your staging is set up properly when you launch, because you don't want your parachutes being deployed as you're trying to lift off. That's counterproductive, so that's very important to know. We'll get into more of this when I'm actually building a rocket, but for today, we're just going to focus on getting science. Now, down here it shows this particular button shows our contracts that we have at the moment. Gather science data and launch our first vessel. In this particular area, this is where milestones achieved or contracts completed will appear, and it'll show us the rewards that we get for doing those things. Now, this engineer's report is probably the most important diagnostic tool in this vehicle assembly building. What this does is, this gives us specifics about the vehicle we're building. The craft stats, for example, we have 2 parts. We can only build a craft with a maximum of 30 parts right now. It's early game. We can increase these limits by upgrading the facilities, but that'll come later. How much our ship weighs, and its dimensions. Now the design checklist is also very important, because as you're building this rocket, if you put something on it that doesn't work, it'll tell you about it here. Or if you're missing something or have too much of something else, it'll tell you here. In varying degrees of severity, we have a little information indicator bubble. We also have an orange triangle saying like caution, and then the red skull and crossbones saying that's probably not going to work, so you should change it. On this particular case, we have 2 things to note. First, we have an unused monopropellant resource. If we right-click on the command pod, it'll tell us that we have 50 units of electric charge and 10 units of monopropellant. Monopropellant is used for RCS systems, which allow the movement of the ship in space by expelling gases. Think of Wall-E using the fire extinguisher in space to get around. That's basically what RCS is. The monopropellant, it's unused because we have nothing that's going to use it. So what we can do is just drag the slider all the way down to 0. Now if you also noticed in the bottom right-hand corner, left-hand corner here, this is our amount of money we have, 31,165, but this indicator is how much this ship is going to cost as we build it. Now if you watch that top number, right now it's 1388. If we move this monopropellant back to where it was, the ship would actually cost 1,400. So getting rid of the monopropellant not only got rid of extra weight that we're never going to use, and therefore don't want to take with us, but it also saved us $12. That's helpful. And then it's also telling us our parachute is missing, which if we were sending this up into the sky, that would be a bad idea. But we don't have to worry about that right now because we're not going anywhere. But as I said before about putting anything over the hatch, if you do that, then we get an indicator here, a severe one, saying the hatch is obstructed. The hatch can't open because it is blocked. Your crew will not be able to enter or exit. So you want to keep an eye on that. This is why you don't want to put anything over the hatch, because your Kerbals will want to eventually get out. You can perform EVAs. Right now we can only perform EVAs while we're on the ground. We can't do them up in the sky or up in space yet, but we'll get to that eventually. But as for now, we have our one Mystery U containment unit. We have Bob Kerman, our scientist, in place, and we're ready to go ahead and launch this. We're going to, up here we can name our craft, and we're going to name it Science Gathering, minus the capital A. Alright, and then we are ready to go. Up here are these buttons. You can create a new blank file. You can open an existing one, save. I'm going to save this one. We can launch with this button, and then leave. So let's go ahead and hit launch. Now, the craft will be moved right out to the launch pad. Now there's some things in this window that need some explanation as well, but I'll get into that more when we're actually launching a rocket. Since we're not going anywhere, we are just going to do some science experiments. The first thing we're going to do here, we have Bob Kerman. He's currently in the command pod, but you can see him down here. It gives a little description of him. He's a scientist. You can take an internal view of the ship. This is inside the command pod. To get in and out of this screen, you would press the C button on your keyboard. Gets you in and out. And we also do an EVA, where you can go ahead and leave the ship. Right now we can only do it when we're on the ground, but we can upgrade the astronaut complex later, and it'll let us do that up in space. For now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to right-click anywhere on the command pod. You see how it's highlighted here. And then we're going to select Crew Report. And this window that pops up is basically our science gathering window. This tells us we're going to collect a crew report from the launch pad. Gives a little description of it, how much data it is. This is important for transmitting using antennas later. And then how much science points we'll get if we were to keep the experiment and recover it at the end of the mission, or transmit it using an antenna. Now you can see right here that the recovery and transmit data rewards or science rewards are exactly the same. Now crew reports and EVA reports are the only two science gathering options that are like this. You notice how the green bar is all the way filled up here and the blue one's all the way filled up. Crew reports and EVA reports will give you the same amount of science whether you recover them or transmit them. If you're in deep space and it's going to be a long time before you get back to the planet and can recover the data, I would always suggest transmitting crew reports and EVA reports, because then you can do them over and over and over again. As long as you're in different locations when you're doing them, you will always get more and more science for that. In this particular case, since we don't even have an antenna, we're going to go ahead and hit Keep Experiment. Next thing we're going to do is right-click on our Mystery Goo containment unit, and we're going to observe the Mystery Goo. And this here is telling us that the Mystery Goo observation from the launch pad, we can gather 3 points of science data from keeping the experiment, or if we were to transmit it, we would only get 0.9. Now, science gathering equipment will always give you more science points for recovery than it would for transmitting. The thing about the mystery goo containment units is that these can only be used once. And when I say that, I mean if you were to recover the data or keep the experiment and then have one of your Kerbals come out and collect the data, you can only use that machine once. Things such as thermometers and barometers you can use over and over again, whether keeping or transmitting, as long as you recover the data if you're keeping it. But mystery goo units and another science collecting unit we'll get at the end of this video, you can only use one time. And I'll show you what I mean by that. We're going to go ahead and hit keep experiment here on the green, and that'll give us 3 points of science. Now if we come down to Bob Kerbin here, we're going to hit go EVA, and he's going to exit the spacecraft. Now, I should point out, I have a few mods installed that aren't really changing anything about the game, except for the fact that when you do an EVA, he will more than likely look like that. That's because that's his EVA suit. This particular mod, I have him because he doesn't really need it, because he's on the planet. He's fine. But while he's holding on to the craft here, we want to right-click on him and select EVA Report. And this will give us 5.6 science points when we keep the experiment. We'll go ahead and do that. And then, as you can see here, if you press F, you can climb away from the ship, or press B to go back in to board. We're actually going to press B to go back in, because that EVA report he can only carry one EVA report on himself at a time. In having him go back in the ship and then come right back out, that EVA report is now stored in the command pod. So now he can do another EVA report while he's away from the ship. Because if I were to do an EVA report here, it would show an EVA report from Launchpad. Gives us 2.4 science, so I'll go ahead and keep experiment. However, if I were to grab a hold, pressing F, grabbing a hold and climbing up, an EVA report from the outside holding onto the ship is technically taking an EVA report from a different location. This is EVA report while flying over Kerbin shores. So that's the thing you want to pay attention for when gathering science. If you're in a different area and your title changes, that gives you a new opportunity to gather science. Like I gathered science points from where I am right now. If I were to leave the launch pad and walk toward the water, which is over that way, then I would get additional science points because it's a different location. Alright, so from here we're going to go over and go to our mystery goo unit. We're going to collect the data, and this here is telling us that removing the experiment data will render this module inoperable. Restoring functionality will require a scientist. We're going to go ahead and remove the data, and if we had anybody but a scientist, such as an engineer or a pilot, this mystery goo containment unit would be completely useless at this point. But since we are a scientist, we can go ahead and click Restore, and that makes it so we can use this multiple times. However, using it multiple times in the same location it'll show us as getting the same amount of science each time, but that's because we haven't turned in our first experiment. When we do turn on our first experiment, we could use this again, but it will show a different amount of science, a less amount, because we got samples from this location already. Regardless, at the moment, we've done EVAs, we've done crew reports, we got mystery science goo data. We are pretty much all done here. So what we're going to do is, up to the very top of the screen, this little drop down comes down, and we're going to hit Recover Vessel. And this is where we'll appear back at the Space Center. But we have a mission summary showing up here. It shows all of the reports and experiments that we recovered from that excursion. and gave us 13.2 science, so we have in total 14.2. We're going to hit next. When you recover a vessel, you will get money back for all the parts that were recovered. The amount that you get back depends on your distance from the Space Center. It says right here this was at the launch pad, so it was 100% value. If we were to land somewhere far away on this planet, we could still recover. You can recover your vessel from anywhere on the planet, but the distance from the Space Center will either raise or lower your the value of the parts that you recover. If you're on the entire other side of the planet, you'll probably get next to nothing. But so that's something to keep in mind when landing or coming back in from space. The closer you can land to the Space Center, the better off you'll be for recovering the amount of money you spent on that ship. And if we hit next again, one crew member recovered, Bob Kerman. He's ready for the next assignment and gained 1 experience. As he gains experience, he will earn gold stars, up to 5 of them. And as he does that, the astronaut will have the ability to do other things on a mission. To scientists will get you more science points. Engineers, I don't honestly know. But pilots, it'll give you more control over the ship that you're flying, and it'll allow you to do more autopilot things, which is very helpful in the later game, because you can, once you figure out how to get to orbit, getting to orbit just becomes a chore, and the more you can do, pop on an autopilot, the easier it is. The more you can focus your energies elsewhere, like getting to another planet. We'll go ahead and hit done. So as you see at our top, we have $45,000 now, and our science, we have 14.2 science points. If we come down here to the corner to our milestones indicator, this here is telling us that we have performed an EVA test at home, and it gave us $3,200 for that and 1 reputation point. And then we've also performed for the first of our experiments at home, which gave us the same reward. We can go ahead and hit delete. We don't really need that anymore. And we also completed our first contract, which is gather science data from Kerbal, and that gave us $7,600 with 1 science point and 3 reputation. We'll go ahead and get rid of that as well. So now we have 14.2 science points. Let's go ahead and go to our Research and Development Center. And this is where we go to spend our science points to unlock further items to use when building ships, rockets, and planes. This here is the tech tree. We start off having the first part here gave us the 6 items that we currently have in the vehicle assembly building. Our next 2 things are Basic Rocketry and Engineering 101, both of which cost 5 science points. We can go ahead and get both because we have 14, so we'll just click on it, hit Research, and there we go. Because that we have these, we now have the option to get the next tier, which will cost 15 science points, 18, and 20 respectively. But our Basic Rocketry gave us a swivel liquid fuel engine, a larger solid fuel booster, and a fuel tank. And this one here gave us a Science Junior, another science gathering piece of equipment, Communitron 16, this is an antenna for transmitting data, and a stack decoupler, which we will use when building a rocket. Pretty good. Okay, so that will bring us to the end for this video. Just showed you how to get some science stuff. In the next video, we will do another science gathering mission, but we'll also build a rocket and see what we can't do about getting up into space. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next video coming in the next day or so.